Окей. Ну что ж, поехали. Меня зовут Андрей Забара, я техлид из IT Divide, и сегодня со мной также Meetup будет проводить Денис Высочин, тоже техлид. И у нас получился такой немножко военный Meetup в такое время. Поэтому я надеюсь, что вы все в безопасности, но готовы дальше делать все, что нужно. Господа и дамы, вопросы можете задавать в Телеграме, это лучше делать в Телеграме, потому что чат здесь может не сохраниться. Я после доклада, мы можем обсудить это с докладчиком, задать какие-то вопросы. Если у вас был какой-то интересный опыт с Page Builder, тоже пишите, с чем столкнулись, что было хорошо сделано, что стоит доработать. Из того, что стоит сказать, давайте общий саундчек проведем еще разочек. Поставьте плюсики, если вы меня слышите хорошо. Так, супер. Так, ну, по крайней мере, меня хорошо слышит пару человек. Уже хорошо. Великолепно. Итак, доклад на английском. Paras, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here, yes.
Cool. Meantime, I would like to introduce our speakers. This is Paras Sood from Adobe. I'm right?
Yeah, that's right.
And please, your word, Paras. You're welcome.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak at your meetup. Gonna start sharing my screen, and I guess we can get started, right? Okay. Right. Are you able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So in today's talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about how does Magento Page Builder work, and we'll look at if you're working on merchant projects for Page Builder, how do you extend and modify the existing functionality in Page Builder. And before we look at that, we will also look at how does Page Builder work functionally. So for those of you who might not be as familiar, it's an opportunity for you to see what Page Builder is all about. So before we get started, a little bit about me. I've been a Magento developer in various roles since 2011. And I've been working in the Adobe Commerce Community Engineering team now, and I'm based in Dublin, Ireland. And before this current role, I was working as a Magento subject matter expert in Magento University. Right, so to get started, what really is Page Builder, right? So basically Page Builder is, it's a Magento extension that's used for creating content by dragging and dropping pre-built controls. And these controls are basically called, content types. So here on the page, you can see a few, content types in action. You can see a row, you can see the column content type, and then you can see the tabs content types, and so on, right? So basically, Page Builder allows you to drag and drop these content types, preview them in the admin panel, and then once you save that, this content renders on the front end. So this is what you see in the admin panel, and then this is what you get on the front end. So it's just a quick way for merchants to organize their content without needing the help of the developers. And then, like I mentioned, the available content types, they are shown in the Page Builder's left-hand side menu. It provides a drag and drop functionality for content creation. And you can drag and drop various content types into staging, as you can see on the slide. So basically, these are the different content types. You keep dragging and dropping them into the staging area. And then, once you publish it, the content appears on the front end. For those of you who are developers and might be curious, Magento uses jQuery's draggable and sortable interfaces, widgets to basically allow these HTML elements to be dropped into the staging area. And I'll cover a few more technical details of how it works behind the scenes, in a few slides. Okay, moving on. So what areas is the page builder available in? So the page builder is available in, if you go to CMS pages, CMS blocks, dynamic blocks on the enterprise or commerce. And then it's also available in, for editing product and category descriptions. And then you can create any sort of product and category attributes and, mark them to have the input type set to page builder. So whichever category and product attributes, are set to use page builder as the input type, they'll have page builder appearing in them. And then some basic configuration. So if you go to stores, configuration, general, content management, advanced content tools, you can enable page builder from there. And then page builder also has the ability to, add Google Maps and so on. So, you can configure the API key from here, and then a couple of other basic settings, which basically, mark the default column grid size, like how many, what's the grid size of a particular column, and then what's the maximum column grid size that can be configured from the page builder widget. These settings are very specific to the column content type. So if you're not familiar with them, that's all right. You don't need to worry about them. And you can always refer to the documentation to figure out what these settings are. But yeah, we'll move on. And then the page builder, this is what the panel looks like, and this is like the staging area. This is called the page builder workspace. And then these are all the content types, and then you would drag and drop these content types into the staging area. One thing to keep in mind is that certain content types, are basically layout content types. So like rows, columns, and tabs. And these would generally be the parents of, all these other content types. And sometimes you can have like tabs within columns, but you can't have multiple columns within, the same column. So there are some restrictions in place. You can refer to the documentation to see, what those exact restrictions are. But on a high level, all these elements, media, and these content types will go into your layout content types, and your layout content types basically control, what's the layout or what does the content on the page organize like. So I already mentioned this. These are the layout content types. These are the element content types. These are media content types, and these are content types. And the names are pretty obvious. So I'm not going to go into them in a whole lot of detail, but as you can see, the elements are basically the various HTML elements like text, heading, buttons, dividers, HTML code. Media is related to media like images, videos, banners, sliders, and maps. And then contents is like if you want to include other blocks or product listings or other dynamic blocks within the content of your page builder. And then if you look at, how does a particular content type work? So if I go back a couple of slides, right, so here you can see that, this is a row content type that has been dropped into the staging area. And then when you hover over this content type, you get this settings panel. And now I'll talk about what this settings panel does here. So yeah, so this is the settings panel that I just showed you for the rows, right? And this has a bunch of settings. So one is delete, this is duplicate. So if you want to duplicate a content type in the staging area, you would click on this, this duplicate button. And this one is the hide. If you want to keep the content type, but you just want to hide it, you can do that as well. And then there's, the settings panel, and then the move panels. When you click on this settings panel, this opens up a form, and this form is driven by a UI component. And as you know, UI components in Magento admin are XML based. So there's a whole lot of XML configuration that has been made available for page builder content types. And those allow you to, basically configure a lot of stuff. We will look at one of the configuration files as an example later on this presentation. One thing to pay attention to is that, these appearances are important. And what happens is that Magento provides the flexibility of adding different sort of configurations for different appearances. So, depending on which appearance is selected, it might have a different bunch of source code and styling files. So I'll talk about this also a little bit, but later on when I'm talking about appearances, just know that I'm referring to this section here, right? And then there's also, and then there can be a bunch of, other settings here, like you have, the background settings, like what background color, if there's a background image, and then there can be content type specific settings as well. Moving on. Then the next question comes like, how do you, customize Page Builder? So one of the quickest ways to customize Page Builder, is to change existing content types and how they look and behave. End users or like your merchandisers or, content creators on the merchant side, they can already use Page Builder's content types to customize their content, using the form editor. But they might want to add like specific properties or change the structure in a way that's specific to their setup. So you as developers, you can actually extend or modify an existing content type by customizing its appearance, or you can even add a new appearance. And as I mentioned, the appearances are configured in XML. So generally you would follow the same kind of steps that you generally follow in Magento to override existing XML configuration that's been done by core modules, right? So you would create a module that has Page Builder as its dependency, and then whichever XML that you're trying to modify, create a similar XML on a similar path with similar nodes, and then since your module loads later on, later than the original Magento core Magento Page Builder module, your XML configurations will override those core configurations. And then another way to modify the behavior in Page Builder for merchant needs would be to add a new content type. So sometimes you might have needs where maybe the merchant has a very specific kind of a content need, and in those cases you can offer to create like a new content type for them. Like I've had in the past, there might have been merchants who might have needed like these player cards on a sports website. So they're selling like these sports materials, ice hockey equipment, and they basically wanted to be able to create content specific to teams. So for those kind of specific scenarios where content customizations are needed, you can basically create a new content type with its own configurations, with its templates, with its own font type and icon, and right. Okay, if you're not speaking, if you could mute yourself, I think that would be great. Next, so how does the design system impact the theme? So Page Builder theme, it would generally always have the same organization. You have the Page Builder, directory, you have the web CSS source directory, you have the web.js and web template directories. right? And then within these directories in the module, you would have a content type directory. And this content type directory would then have, all the different components. Like, for example, we talked about the row content type. So what you would have is that you have the page builder directory and then content type directory. And within that, there would be a row.xml file, and that would have all the configuration for, the various appearances that are there for the row. So like I mentioned before, appearances are important because those basically drive what the behavior of these components is like, both in the admin preview and especially on the front end. And it's a similar structure for CSS and JavaScript and your HTML templates. And then the design system has an impact on the styles organization as well. You have and it follows, the best practices that Magento theming has for the front end. So you have the page builder, its main style file is web CSS source _ module.less. And then this module.less file would have the imports for all the files. So you use this file to merge, the content type styles into the pub static output. And then that way, all the modules, styles is included in that. And then each content type would have its own import.less. So basically, what happens is that each content type has its own import.less file. And this import.less file would import, all the different appearances that are there for a particular content type. And this import.less, as you can see, is imported into the module.less file. You can always refer to the existing page builder code. It's open source now, and you can find it on GitHub as well. And you can look at the way these things are organized. And then, so if we'll take the example of a banner, right? So a banner has, these multiple appearances, right? Collage center, collage left, collage right, default, and poster. These are all, the various appearances that are there in a banner. And here you can see this is what the import.less file looks like, where it's, importing, where it is importing all the different, this is what the module.less file looks like, where it is importing all these, banner import.less. For every content type, it is importing the import.less file. And then the import.less file for the banner would have, all these files which are specific to each appearance. And then each of these appearance has its own less file. So that way it is segregated in a way that, every appearance can have its own styles. And then where can you find the part of the page builder find? You can find, the page builder theme is divided into three big entities. So first, in the base module in your vendor directory, this module is part of the Magento core and contains all the default themes and functional parts. And then the two other entities are for your customizations or, specific developments. If you want to modify an element in, let's say, vendor Magento module page builder view front end, you can use the theme, or you can do it in your own module, right? So page builder files, it's like any other Magento module, right? Where the module itself is there, and then you can either override the module, in a theme or in your own module. So that's really, that's really the way it works. It's very similar to the way some of the other Magento development works. And then now I will talk a little bit about, in depth of how does exactly Magento's, page builder technically work behind the scenes, and this might be of interest. So the way it works is that you have the staging area, right? Where where the content types are dragged and dropped. When you drag and drop a particular content type, what Magento does is that it has its own require.js module or the view model, right? And that view model is bound to this preview.html template. So for those of you who have worked with, the checkout in Magento, where you have knockout.js and then you have a two-way binding between the HTML template and the view model. This is exactly the same. So you would have a preview.html template, and this is bound to a JS module, which would be preview.js. So it would follow the same path, block default preview.js. So here in this directory, within template, you have content type and then button, and inline is the appearance, and then preview.html. And similarly, in this directory, you would have the JS component, which is basically JS content type, button, inline, and then preview.js. And so basically when you drag and drop, let's say you drag and drop a banner or a button content type into stage, Magento will initialize the view model and bind it to preview.html. And then it will insert this preview.html within the existing HTML, in the staging area. And then that way, once it is inserted, all the CSS and all is applied to it. All the CSS classes are already there. And then you will start seeing, it in the preview mode. And then as and when you change the settings by going into a form for this particular, for this particular content type, you will find that, it will. So for example, in case of row, right, when you click on this settings tab and then this form opens, and then you have a bunch of these settings and you start changing these settings around. This data is basically, tied up with the view model that's assigned to the template, right? And because of the two-way binding in knockout.js, whatever background and all that you give, these attributes are already tied to the CSS through the two-way binding in template. And then those template, when you save these settings, will start taking their effect in the preview mode. So if I go back to the slide that I was on, right? So basically preview.html, allows you to see or allows you to configure what the content looks like in the admin panel in the preview, right? So you make all the configurations, you drag and drop everything, and you see that it looks good. You have all these forms and all that, and then you click save. And when you click on the save button for saving the content, the front end basically then picks up all the content that's there, all the data that is there, and it converts it into HTML with CSS selectors, and uses the master template to basically save the content, right? So it converts whatever is there in the preview.html content, it uses the master.html to convert that into content that will be saved for the front end. And then when that post request is made, to the database to save the content, it is saved in a format that all the CSS and all the HTML content is saved with that. And so then when that happens, that basically means that, there is no magic that happens on the front end, because the front end has to be kept very light. So there is no additional JavaScript or anything from Page Builder on the front end. All the magic happens in the admin panel itself. So when you save it, it converts it into the final content that will be rendered on the front end. And then, the front end just renders whatever is in the database. And then when the same content, which is saved in the database, is rendered in the admin panel, the preview.html template and the view model for this template would convert that into a format and styling which looks like the preview, right? So where you have the gray boxes, and then within that you see the preview content. So I hope that's clear. The big takeaway from this would be that if you're looking into any page builder issues that page builder is not doing this or that, in most cases you will need to look at what's happening in the admin panel. There is no magic that happens on the front end. So that's a key thing to know. Okay, and so then, if we look at, so when you're overriding templates, what do you need to do, right? So first you create your own dedicated module. And then you need to, like any other modules in Magento, you need to remember to respect the file path for you to be able to correctly override it, right? And then you extend the configuration file of your component. So you have, let's say you are working on a banner, right? And you want to modify the XML that is there for a banner. So you would basically go to admin HTML page builder content type and then banner.xml file, and that would have a bunch of configuration. And in your own module, you can create the XML file in the same exact path and then override all the XML configuration that's there, right? So that way it works for you. And then similarly, if you want to make a reference to the appearance of a corresponding component, you can update the templates and their attributes with your own custom template path, right? So basically, web template content type, and then our example component that we were trying to override was banner, and then within appearance, there would be a bunch of other templates for preview and master, which you can then override here. And that way then they would then render likewise. Talking about the XML, right? The component XML, this is an important file. So talking about the contents for this file, this is what it looks like. So like I mentioned, there's a component name, and then you have the collage. This is the appearance. And you can have like as many appearances, right? Like we saw in the one of the previous slides, the banner content type has like 5 or 6 slides, right? So 5 or 6 appearances. And then each of these appearances defines its own master template and preview template. And by master template, we already saw that the master template is what Magento uses to convert, the content that's configured in the admin panel to be, to convert it into content that's going to show up on the front end. So that's how it is. And then the general convention for the template path, would always be like this, where you have the module page builder, and then you have the content. You would have the content type, banner, collage, right, and then master. And then similar, it's a similar way for that. Yeah, and then this also has a bunch of other configurations. Probably, we don't have enough time to cover all of those in a lot of detail, but you can always refer to the documentation that's there on Magento Dev Docs on Magento Page Builder. After this, after I stop sharing my slides, I can probably share the links with you as well. So I'll share the links in the chat. Right. And then, like I already covered, by convention, the storefront render template is always going to be master.html. And if you go back to this example, right, so we had the banner content type, and this has an appearance collage, right? And that's why here then you see admin HTML web template content type banner. And then this is the appearance collage, right? And these are the master and the preview templates for it. Let's say now you add another appearance here called collage left. So then you would have another directly collage left under banner, and that would have its own master and preview template. So this basically allows you to have different HTML for different, for different appearances. So I hope that makes sense to you. And then if we talk about, extending if we talk about extending a content type, so what you basically do is that you create an extension module, and then you like I said, one of the quickest ways to customize Page Builder is by changing how existing content types look and behave. So end users can already use Page Builder's content types to customize their content using the form editor. But like I mentioned that, your merchant might have specific use cases. So to allow you for those specific use cases, you might need to extend a content type. And the form, right? And the forms that we've seen for the various content types, these forms are UI components. And as we've seen before, UI components are basically XML configuration based components. So, that is something to keep in mind, right? And then if you want to extend them or modify them, you would follow the same process that you follow for, extending or changing any UI component form. Right. And then you can also extend appearances. For you to extend appearances, you would need to basically, if I go back, in order to extend an appearance, you would find this file in so Page Builder content type, whatever is the name of your component, let's say banner.xml. Within this file, you will have multiple appearances, and each of these appearances has a bunch of configurations. And so for you to modify these, you would override the file in your own theme or module, and then at that same path, you would, make your modifications. So, these are the detailed steps that I've just already mentioned. So you basically, create an empty extension module, and then within that module, you would have the module.xml and the registration.php file, and then you would add, admin layout, page builder, banner form.xml would be your the layout file, right, for that particular thing. And within this layout file, you will mention what's the UI component for the form, right, for this particular content type. And then page builder content type banner.xml is the configuration file where you add all the configuration, like I mentioned, for all the different appearances and their different settings. So three things, right? Like if you want to add a form, you want to extend appearances, you want to extend forms. There are three ways, three overrides that you can do. And then you can also override the styling and the templates, but generally, you don't need to do that. Those are like core. But if there is something very specific, then you might need to. But in most cases, it's probably going to be like just add one more field to the form and use that. So yeah, that's how you do it. Right. And then extending appearances. So this is, these are all so this is what the file looks like in more detail. And if you need to make any configurations, you can do that. And so to customize appearances, you must create a new configuration file, right, named with the same name and relative path as the configuration file responsible for originally declaring the appearance. So overriding this file would be similar to how you override layout XML files. So Magento merges page builder configuration files from across modules, like I mentioned. And this is where Magento's module dependency is important, because your module, for you to override this XML, should load after the Magento core module. So that is something to keep in mind, right? Right. And then extending forms, I already mentioned that page builder forms are UI component forms, and this means that they follow the same conventions as any other UI component form in Magento. So if you're not already familiar with UI components, you can learn more about them from DevDocs. And there's a comprehensive guide on UI components on DevDocs. And then before you add a field to the form for an existing content type, you need to know where to add it. So basically, you need to decide, which field set to add in. So this is a different field set, and then lower down, you might have a background field set and then a bunch of other field sets. So, you can do that by modifying or extending the existing XML, right? So maybe to give you like a quick overview, I can probably show you in the code base. So if you give me 1 second, I'll just pull up the code base and walk you through about what the code looks like. All right, let me share my screen. Okay, are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So right now I have this Magento 2 page builder module, right? And as we saw, most of the magic happens in this admin HTML directory, right? Because like I mentioned in the presentation that, all the magic happens on the admin side. So that's why most of the things that are there are on the admin, are in the admin area, not in the front end area. If you compare, the front end, it's very bare, right? So you can see here, it has JavaScript, TypeScript, templates, fonts, CSS. On the front end, there's only CSS and fonts. So all the actual logic of the drag and drop and, those things happens on the admin side. That's why it's the admin area that's more heavy. And then, if we take the example of banner, right? We were looking at banner. So this is the configuration. This is what the configuration file for the banner content type looks like. And, I mentioned these are all the different appearances, and each appearance has a bunch of, the preview template and master template. We already talked about what they do. And then there's a bunch of, other settings that each of these appearances would have, right? So this is one appearance, collage left, and then you can see collage center has its own bunch of configuration. Collage right has its own. So in a way, appearances, you can think of appearances as different forms of the same content type, and they might be quite different. So that's why there is a need for like even their own master and preview templates, right? And then a bunch of additional data. And so this is what the configuration looks like. And then, I mentioned that these are through Knockout.js binding, right? So if I were to find the template, if I'm to find the template, HTML template for this banner content type, you can see that, I go into web template content type banner, and within here, I can see a bunch of, these are all the different appearances, and each of these appearances has the master and the preview template, right? And then if I have to see, which JS module does this, what's the view model for this particular template, I can go to JS content type, banner, and then preview.js, right? So in case of banner, there's just a single component that they're all bound to. And then this would have functions which are called in those templates. So if I go back to this template, this preview.html, so all these functions get options, and all these is WYSIWYG supported, and all that, all these methods are defined in this banner preview, right? Right. So like I mentioned, is WYSIWYG supported is one of them. And then there's a bunch of other ones. One other important thing, if you are working to contribute to the core module, the core module uses JavaScript, and sorry, not JavaScript, but TypeScript, and that TypeScript is compiled into these required JS modules. So that makes it working with them even easier. So this is what the banner content type view model looks like in TypeScript, much more easier to read. And then you can always refer to these. These are now part of the open source repository, so you can always refer to them whenever you're looking at them. So on a high level, this is technically how it works. Oh yes, and then if you look at the UI components, right? So if I go to Page Builder, banner form, here you can see that the UI component Page Builder banner form has been configured for it. And if I look into UI components and then Page Builder banner form, you'll find that this is the UI component with all its different data sources and field sets. So as you can see, it has all these field sets that are being added, and then every content type can have its own fields, right? And then a merchant might need you to add additional fields, which you can do, and then you can use them in the preview template, and that way you can modify things. Okay, so that's it for the presentation. You can now ask me any questions that you might have.
Cool, thank you for Paras. Dennis, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks for presentation. I have one question regarding converters. So how it works inside, because I had a problem that some empty divs interrupt the working for preview in admin panel. So maybe I think it's an issue in converters. So how we can debug it, and how we can maybe create our own converters for Page Builder.
Right, so I'm going to share my screen again. Are you able to see my code? See the code here?
Yes.
Okay, great. So if we look at the configuration, right? If we take an example, let's take at banner.xml, or let's do maybe another one, right? So as you can see that there's a bunch of converters that can be used, right? And you can see here that the converters are generally used, to convert the format of data from DOM to the JS object. So like I mentioned, there is two-way binding between the templates and the JavaScript and your knockout.js objects, right? And because of this binding, you sometimes for certain things like border style or border color, the format in which you store the data in the JavaScript object might be different to the way it needs to render, as CSS in the HTML. So for those kind of scenarios, you would generally use converters. And then to look at these converters a little bit more, if I go to the TypeScript and then I go to converter directory, this is where all the converters are. And then look at style, and let's look at border style, right? So the first thing is that all converters implement this converter interface, which has two methods, from DOM and to DOM, right? And as you can see, even from the docs, you can tell that these two methods are basically invoked for converting the value from, when the data is being transformed from the JavaScript object to the DOM or otherwise, right? So this basically facilitates the two-way binding between knockout.js and the JavaScript storage. And so for you, if you thought that a particular converter was causing problems, you could probably put a breakpoint here on the front end, and and just figure out like if it's messing up with some values or not. And depending on whichever converter that you thought it was, you'll be able to look at, like if you look at some HTML converters, you can see exactly what it's trying to do. So it should be fairly straightforward for you to debug that. And these converters are passed data from, so if you look at the preview, so let's say banner preview.ts, right? So each preview, every preview object has a content type, right? And these content types would have a data property. And this data property has the data that's being converted by the converter. So that is something, you can also look at the data that's there in the content type or in this preview.content type object, and then take it for there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. So I need to look at preview.js. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and one tip that I would have is that you should look at the GitHub module. Let me bring the link to that, because that's what is readable code. The JavaScript code is just compiled from TypeScript. So if you're looking to do a deep dive of Page Builder and understand how the JavaScript modules work, it's probably better if you look at the TypeScript. So I'll link you to the public repository, and that repository now, after Page Builder went open source, that has like all the TypeScript code as well. So you should be able to follow that better.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
So
cool. For us, like I understand, when we came to admin area and try to build some page using, of course, Builder, we have base configuration, and when we save it, all information came to Magento, and in this step start magic. It will be processed to HTML. I understand, right?
Yeah. So just before, just when you click on the save button, Page Builder code kicks in and it converts whatever you had configured. It converts that into a format that will be rendered on the front end, right? So because on the admin panel, the HTML that you have is in the format that that basically, for example, maybe if I can just very quickly share my screen and show you, I think that'll be faster. Just give me 1 second. Okay. Yeah, so can you see my screen with the Page Builder? Yeah. So let's say I drag and drop this stuff, right? And then this is a column, and then within this column, I drag a text. I say test, right? And then I duplicate it, and then I duplicate this. It's like this, and say this, right? So now I have this bunch of HTML on this page, and this is not what it's going to look like on the front end, right? On the front end, there won't be any of this gray areas and settings and all that, right? So now when I click on save, Page Builder will basically convert this admin HTML. It will convert it into what that HTML needs to look like for the front end. Because like I mentioned, right, there's two-way binding. So we have Java, all this data is also present in JavaScript, right? So in JavaScript also, we are maintaining that there is one column group, and this column group has, three column children, and the first column child has 3 text children, right? So all of this tree is also being created in JavaScript. As soon as you in your knockout.js objects, and then as soon as you click on save, that knockout.js object invokes the master.html template. Right, these are the master HTML templates. If I go back here, we go to template, content type, let's say it was a banner, and then let's say it was collage center, right? So preview.html, this is what's in the admin panel, and then as you click save, page builder
We
now
change
takes all the data
template for viewing for customers. Yeah, for front. Okay. Yeah.
for the admin, and then master.html is for the front end. So it uses this to convert the content into front end and then posts. That is what's saved in the database.
Okay, cool. Then we just something like changing template. We just saving the data and changing template.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, what if we have situation if we need to create some page like we do this before when we have just CMS page, right? We will create a model. For model, we create data patch and then create object. Oh, excuse me. We have small air alarm right now. Oops. Okay. And what situation? We will create object with page, CMS page, and set to title, set content, like HTML. That is all. And we will save it. Ready. But okay, but how we can use it with, how we can use, how we can create some page with data patch for page builder?
That's a very good question, right? It's a very good question. And the answer is that with data patch, it would be the same exact process as you have for CMS pages, right? So with data page, when you're creating a CMS page, what you would generally do is that on like a lower environment, like a test environment or staging environment or something, you create the content, then you get that content, you put it in a maybe like a text file or something in your code base, and then in your data patch you say that okay, when the data patch runs, it reads this file, whatever content is, it saves it in the database, right? So that wherever the code goes, it updates.
Excuse me, please. We can we can build the page in admin, yeah, and then change from view to the code view, yeah. Show me the code, yeah. Copy code and paste to the patch.
Right, that's what you would do, right, with a normal CMS page.
Yeah, but what about page builder?
Right, so for page builder, like I mentioned, all the magic happens in the admin panel, right? So once you have created the page in the admin panel, and now you want to create a data patch for it, just fetch the content directly from the database and use that in your upgrade script, in your data patch, sorry.
We need to create it, save it, find in database, copy paste, and use for patch.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, could you show me maybe what we have in database for the some, I don't know, like example for some.
Yeah, that's again a very good question. Give me 1 second. Right, so,
very interesting what we have in database.
Like I said, all the magic happens in the admin HTML, right? Admin side. So the database only has what will show on the front end, right? So are you guys able to see my screen?
Yeah.
Right. So right, let's say select star from CMS page. Right, this is the So let's say we have this page 287, right? Let's pick this 296. So this is the content. I'm going to copy it and I am going to
Okay.
paste it.
Yeah. Please.
I pasted it here, and then if I say, right.
Like I see, we have just CMS block template with blocks, templates.
Right. So this basically has, so this is basically the content. So as you can see, it saves all the CSS that was configured, all the settings that were configured, and then it saves the content as it is, right? So now if you were to, let's say you want to create a data patch for it, right? You want to migrate this to different environments like production and all that using a data patch. So you just get what is there in the database, put it in the data patch. And then once it is saved in the database, the page builder on the front end, it will show as it is, right? That's what needs to happen. And on the admin HTML, the page builder is able to process this code and convert it into what it should look like in the admin panel.
Yeah, I understand. And then we will have main image, what user will see. Okay, it's okay, but I'm not front-end developer, but I heard from others what situation we have. When we talk about page builder, all say, okay, it's a very cool tool. Any customer can open admin area and build some page, and cool, fine. But we have situation when customer creates some page or block of this page. I don't know. Let's imagine some customer adds something. No matters. But when we work with this, we have situation when we create some theme. Customer add some default components, but then we see situation when we need fix some components in front end because something wrong with styles.
Right.
I mean, we have default styles for themes, but we have different style. How we can map these styles?
Right. So out of the box, page builder would fall back on the theme styles. And if the button is, let's say blue in the theme, that's the color that the button will show. So if you follow theming best practices for Magento, generally you would not run into, those kind of problems. But if you are running into these problems where, where the color scheme is not matching or those kind of issues that you need to look into, then you need to examine if the CSS and theming best practices have been followed. And there can be challenges, right? Because sometimes there can be CSS which interferes with page builder CSS. But that generally happens when there's a lot of customizations, and that's just a cost associated with, if you have too many customizations. But out of the box, it does rely on, the fallbacks on the main theme that's there. Like I've seen cases previously where, somebody took out less from Magento, and then they started using Sass because that's what they were familiar with. But then they did not add Sass to, the Sass implementation to the admin HTML. And because of that, what happened was that the customer is seeing, blue color of the button in the admin HTML, but on the front end, they are seeing whatever the Sass theme is doing. So it's, with page builder, you need to be very careful to follow, all the best practices of following Magento to the T, because on the front end, it is very common that people like to use their own tools. Somebody will start using gulp-based compiling, or they want to use SAS or another cool thing, but then they forget about the admin panel. And so what the customer sees in merchant sees in the admin panel is not what actually happens on the front ends. But so long as you stick to, the default Magento way of doing things, I think it should be less of these kind of cases.
Mm-hmm. Cool. One more question. We already discussed with, I don't remember, with someone from Adobe, this situation, not this different, okay, it's not matter right now, but we discussed problem related with slick slider, if I'm not wrong. Dennis, I'm right?
Yeah. Slick slider, how to optimize it, and
like I remember, if we Magento use slick slider, and this library have problem with performance, and then we have not very good point in Google Insights.
Right. To be honest, I can't really answer that because slick slider is there with Magento out of the box for a long time. I'm sure you are familiar with other alternatives that are there. Like there's a Hiva theme which has better performance, and I think they also have slider functionalities, and I think they might. I think the way they do things is a little bit more optimized than the Luma theme. But yeah, I'm not sure if there is like an alternate which is not like a customization to replace the slick slider with something else. I know that like the page builder banner slider, it uses slick slider behind the scenes. And right now, I'm not sure if there's any easy alternates to, replace that with something else.
And I like understand if you use Hiva, you can't use Page Builder.
I think somebody from Hiva would be able to answer that better. I am not sure where their compatibility with the Page Builder is. Yeah,
I think we need to check it. Okay, guys, do you have some question about Page Builder? It's a big theme, many information for investigation, like I understand. Like I see, I don't have question right now. Nobody asked me something additional. Dennis?
Nothing from me right now. I just get answer for my question, and I don't see any questions in chat and Telegram as well. So please welcome.
Cool. Thank you very much, Paras. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your speech. Very interesting theme and what you said. I hope we can join to contribute in this direction. And thank you all for your time. I hope we see all together sometimes, maybe later. Дамы и господа, я очень надеюсь, что мы встретимся еще. Слава Украине! Спасибо вам.
Right. I just wanted to say I've dropped my email address in the chat, yeah, if anybody wants to reach out to me with any questions, you can email me and I'd be happy to respond. And yeah, thanks very much for having me on the meetup. And I wish to sometime be able to come down to Kyiv or something for a meetup and have some. Maybe after a meetup we could go out and have some drinks or something together. So I look forward to a day when we can do that. And till then, all the best to everybody, and Slava Ukraine.
Thank you
guys. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.